Right, this is exactly the same slide that you looked at the end of yesterday's lesson, and it's because I am really trying to impress upon you the importance of all these things that we are looking at. Your teachers are going to be really disappointed if when they mark these diary entries, you have not thought about all of these elements that I am going through with you. They are vital, they are crucial to you improving whatever your last written grade was. Okay? So today's lesson is the last preparation lesson before you write your diary entry. And we're going to finish off looking at these 3 other exclamation marks. We're not really going to spend much time. Did I just say exclamation marks? I mean punctuation marks. Obviously didn't have enough Weetabix for my breakfast this morning. Right, 3 punctuation marks. We're not going to spend much time at all looking at exclamation marks and question marks. Again, you would have done these very early doors at your primary school. And you would have been taught these, they would have been referred to in years 7 and 8. So they're quite simple. I'm going to read through the information I've given you in the box, but then we're done with those. The main one for me to concentrate on today is semicolons, which are not so easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, so exclamation mark. Exclamation marks are used at the end of statements when a strong emotion is being expressed. Good and bad emotions, so surprise, excitement or delight, but also anger, fear or shock. And the reason that we use them is to tell the reader to add emphasis to a sentence. They might also suggest that a speaker is shouting. So examples here. How dare you? Oh, for goodness sake. I shall never forgive you. Help me. I can't believe it. Watch out. Some excellent examples of my acting abilities there. Miss Hamlet would be very proud of me. So, strong emotions and about volume. Question marks. These do what they say on the tin, but they are often missing from some students' writing. So let's just remind ourselves they're used to show questions have been asked. Now you might say, well, in a diary entry, how would I use that? Well, the character would ask question of themselves. So, should I tell them? What am I to do? Did I understand their words? Is life to be a constant struggle? Will they find me guilty? Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so your teacher will expect there to be perhaps 1 or 2 question marks in your diary entry. Obviously, we don't expect loads. It's not that sort of piece of writing. And you would never have loads of question marks in a piece of writing anyway. Okay, so that's ticked then. Exclamation mark, question mark, both used in your diary entry. On to semicolons. Okay, they are not easy peasy lemon squeezy. Much more thought is needed here. However, this may just be revision for some of you. Some of you might be absolutely fine with them, but for others, it's time to understand how to use them to make sure we are including them in this diary entry. Right, understanding semicolons. There are 2 important rules for you to follow. Rule number 1, the words before the semicolon and the words after the semicolon must both create main and independent clauses. We should have that independent clause straight in our head because we revisited independent and subordinate clauses in our lesson yesterday. Okay, so remember, an independent clause is a group of words which makes sense on its own. And rule 2, there must be a connection, a link between the 2 parts of the sentence. So here's my example. Mrs. Gardner reads a lot. She has many books in her house. So both parts are independent clauses. You can see in that box at the bottom. I could have written it, Mrs. Gardner reads a lot, full stop. She has many books in her house, full stop. So that's me checking that both pieces of information can stand on their own. They are independent clauses. The other grey box at the bottom shows there is a connection between the two parts. The fact that I have many books in my house supports the idea in the statement that I read a lot. I didn't have to have them. I could just go to the library. Well, not at the minute because libraries aren't open, but in the normal world, I could go to the library. But the fact that I do have a lot of books in my house, and I do have a huge number of books in my house, supports the fact that I read a lot. So, are they both independent clauses? Yes, they are. Is there a connection, a link between the two parts? Yes, there is. So let's have a look at semicolons in action then. I would like you to write today's date and the title using semicolons accurately and underline both. Pause the video while you do this and then come back to me. Okay, I have given you 12 examples here. You haven't got to write all 12 examples down. You have got to write into your book the examples which are correct. You can see in that little box near the bottom of the screen, I have reminded you of the two questions you need to ask yourself. Are both parts independent clauses? And is there a link between these two parts? So you need to pause me and you need to work your way through those 12 examples and the examples which are correct. So the examples where both sections are independent clauses and where there is a link between the two parts, those sentences need to end up in your exercise books. And the ones which you think are incorrect, where the semicolon cannot be used and is not used correctly, you just leave those out. Okay? Here is the support page for you to mark that last activity. So there are the 5 correct sentences where the semicolon has been accurately used. So tick those. Hopefully you got them all right. If you haven't got all of those sentences, then have a look at the second box where you will notice that in brackets after the incorrect sentence, I have put the reason why the semicolon cannot be used. And there are only 2 rules, so the reason can only be 2 of 1 things. So in that first one, the weather outside was awful, their car was bright red. The reason that's incorrect is because the 2 parts are not linked. The fact that their car was red has no connection or link whatsoever to the fact that the weather outside was awful. And then in that box, if you have a look at number 3, inside the house was quiet, not a sound. So here, the reason this semicolon does not work is because the second part, not a sound, is not an independent clause. So therefore, it is incorrect. Okay, I hope you did well with those and that having those 2 rules in your head, asking those 2 questions has helped you to understand better how to use semicolons in your own writing. At last, we are writing as a character and you need to decide who you are going to pick from the Crucible as your character to write a diary entry for. You can pick Reverend Hale, Abigail Williams, Thomas Putnam, Tituba, Reverend Parris, or any of the other characters. These are just sort of the main 5, I think, that we know quite a lot about in Act 1. So you could do Proctor if you wanted, you could do Betty, you could do Mercy Lewis. There are other characters you can do, but these are the main ones that we've come across. Okay, so who are you going to pick? Now then, that is completely up to you. And on the next slide, I have done a mind map for you of Thomas Putnam and Tituba and the sort of things that I would include in my diary entry if I was going to write as either of those 2 characters. That is the end of the lesson then, really, and you've done all your preparation ready for next lesson, when you will be writing your diary entry. So if we choose Thomas Putnam, what sort of things are we going to be expecting to refer to in his diary entry? Well, he doesn't like Reverend Parris being in charge. He doesn't like authority above him at all. He's a very arrogant, self-important man who thinks he knows best. He has a lot of money. People should do as he tells them. He feels that money should give him power and authority, and people should obey him. He has got the great sadness in his life that he and his wife have buried 7 babies and only have their daughter Ruth, who has survived, and they are very puzzled and upset by the fact they have lost so many children. His only daughter Ruth now appears ill after the night in the woods when the girls danced and conjured spirits, and he's obviously worried about her. He knows people in the village do not like him. He knows he's not popular, but he's not really worried about this. Money is more important to him, and power and influence are more important to him. Linked to that power and influence, he owns a lot of land and is very wealthy. Remember, in the real Salem, his father was the wealthiest man in Salem, and he was in a position of power, and unfortunately, as many people in power do, he abused that position. Disturbingly, he knew his wife sent his daughter to Tituba to conjure up spirits of their dead babies, and in the Puritan religion, as you should know and understand, having done all of these PowerPoints, it was a very strict religion, and that idea of trying to talk to the devil, trying to get information to the devil would have been frowned on greatly. It would have been a real sin to try and do that. So if you chose to write about Reverend Parris, there's a lot of ideas there of things you could refer to. Right, you might decide to write as Tituba, who we haven't actually seen a lot of yet, but we know quite a lot about. So she was brought to America by Reverend Parris as his slave. So in her diary entry, you could spend some time with her feeling very sad about the home and the family that she was made to leave behind. She always gets the blame when things go wrong. She always gets shouted at, and she always gets into trouble because she's the minority. People think that they can blame her, and nobody will speak up for her. She did agree to conjure spirits for Abigail. Not that she actually can, but she did agree to do it. But she only did it because it was fun. Possibly, knowing Abigail as we do now, she might have done it because Abigail threatened her with something. I'll leave that up to you. The white village of Salem is very prejudiced against her, and she has no true friends to confide in. So in her diary entry, you would need to convey the idea that she is very lonely and very isolated. She cares greatly for Betty, and she's scared that Betty is poorly after dancing in the woods, not only because she'll be in trouble, but because she cares for Betty as well. And then my final idea was that her religion was very different. She was very spiritual in her religion, in her culture. So the Puritans in the village, the rest of the village, would find it easy to believe that she was capable of witchcraft above anybody else. Okay, as I say, they are ideas. When you're writing your diary entry tomorrow, if you want to have this screen up and develop these ideas that I've given you, then that is absolutely fine. I am not trying to trick you. It is not a memory test. It is a writing assessment, looking at how well you use language and punctuation and paragraphs and sentences. Okay, folks, that's it for today. I'll see you for our final lesson tomorrow.